Well, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops held its first public day of the 2023 Spring Assembly in Orlando, Florida today. The event featured remarks from Archbishop Timothy Broglio as well as the Papal Nuncio. Several topics were on the agenda. There were also a message to the Holy Father thanking him for his leadership of the church. The assembly wraps up tomorrow. And joining us now is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, who is in Orlando right now covering the meetings. Matthew, great to be with you as always. As we just heard, both the Papal Nuncio and the President of the USCCB spoke today. What stood out the most to you about their remarks?
Yeah, there were two things. First, it's great to be with you, Tracy, especially from here where the bishops are gathered. Two things really jumped out. The question or the topic of synodality has been overhanging the U.S. Church and, in fact, the global church for a number of years now at the request of Pope Francis. And that was very much a topic of conversation today, especially by the Papal Nuncio, Archbishop Christophe Pierre, who talked about synodality and Francis's vision for it, but also the efforts to commit to it, especially on the part of the U.S. Church. He used the phrase that we've heard a number of times, that sometimes it's difficult to define synodality, but he tied it to the three-part aspect that we often hear from Pope Francis of encounter, of listening, and then of discerning. And interestingly enough, he tied the portion of discerning to the Eucharistic revival happening, of course, now also in the United States. Archbishop Broglio listed a number of the key items that the bishops are facing right now. One of them, of course, is a Eucharistic revival. Another is immigration. And he also touched significantly on the Dodger situation in Los Angeles, hearkening, he said, this brings us back to the questions of the know-nothings and the rise of intolerance against Catholics that we're seeing today.
Yeah, Matthew, I know there are also discussions about the Shreveport Martyrs, 5 priests who died in Louisiana while they were ministering to the sick back in the 1870s. Tell us more about that. Yeah,
so as we have seen over the last years, the bishops have been asked to give their support to advancing the cause for beatification and canonization of various figures in American history. And in this case, it was the Shreveport Martyrs. Those are 5 priests who were from Brittany in France, who came to the United States to serve and then found themselves in the middle of a crisis of yellow fever in Shreveport in 1873. Here we are on the 150th anniversary of that horrendous event in which as much as a quarter of the population of Shreveport actually died from this epidemic. Each of these priests gave their lives in service to the church in caring the pastoral care for souls at the time. One by one, they succumbed to the yellow fever, and as each of them headed into Shreveport to give care, pastoral care, the final rites, and that sort of really pastoral needs of the dying, each of them knew that they were probably not going to survive this, and indeed they didn't. So this heroic witness, the word martyr itself comes from witness. This heroic witness is something that has really stood the test of time, and their cause has been opened. So the bishops here have been asked to add their voice of support to advancing the cause. And it was quite a moment, I think, when we heard more details about their services and their death. As one of them said, I go knowing I will die, but this is the shortest road to heaven.
Matthew, we have a little less than a minute left or so, but quickly, what's on the agenda for tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow, the bishops are picking up a couple of important things. The first is a discussion about whether to issue a revision of the health care directives. In other words, the ethics that Catholic hospitals are expected to uphold. This has become very important in light of transgender surgeries, a so-called euphemism for gender-affirming care, and the place and role of Catholic hospitals in opposing that in culture. The bishops are also going to discuss their strategic priorities, as well as a pastoral letter, a pastoral statement on the part of the bishops for people with disabilities. Once again, the bishops recognizing the pastoral need that we have in the United States for those with disabilities. And then we're likely to have as well an update from Bishop Robert Barron on the upcoming World Youth Day, something that I know all of the bishops are very focused on, and certainly that we as a network are also very focused on.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Bunson, great to be with you as always. We appreciate it.